Hello and welcome to episode 16 of the Long Shot Podcast, brought to you by 342 Productions. I'm your host, as always, Duncan Robinson, and I'm here with Davis Reed. Davis, how are we doing?
I'm doing great. I'm in good health, but I'm curious how you are doing.
I'm in good health as well. There were maybe some reports that I wasn't. It was looking a little shaky there for a second. I'll start by saying this. I have made it a prideful stance of mine to always try to play through, any sort of minor bumps and bruises, that sort of thing. Or, different times throughout my career, I haven't felt 100% and gone out there and still played. Monday night against the Chicago Bulls, I did not feel well before the game. Stomach kind of shaky, little something. And, nothing like really out of the ordinary. But as the day kind of went on, I kind of started to realize I wasn't feeling so hot. And around the halfway mark of the game, pretty early on in the game, I knew I wasn't myself. I just didn't feel my normal energy-wise, felt kind of depleted or whatever. And then in the second half, after we came out for halftime, it was very clear that I'd actually kind of started to go into the range of, if I continued to push myself, then maybe just kind of a not great idea. So I had to leave that game, unfortunately, in the middle of the game. And that type of stuff is always challenging because it kills me. I want to be there for my teammates and I want to, continue to try to help this playoff push. But it was tough. Yeah. I'm feeling better now though, so I appreciate it.
Good. Yeah. Well, I just want to, as a supporter of Duncan Robinson, I do just want to point out, even battling a sickness, you were +4 last night in your time on the court. So you were still bringing value to your team, which I think is good. It takes me back to, I watched you play in LA for the first time in your career. You played at Staples Center and something very similar happened. It was your first time playing at Staples, first time going up against LeBron. I had the privilege of being there. We're all fired up, and same thing, battling a sickness.
Honestly, it was very, very similar. That one, I did not feel well at all. And mind you, this isn't just like you wake up a little bit under the weather. If that happens, I'm playing through that 100% of the time. This is like, in both cases, I was sick. So like I said, I'm feeling better now. But yeah, it was very similar. And you unfortunately were there for that performance as well, which was an ugly one as well. And I appreciate you trying to bring up the +4, but that was maybe the only redeemable statistic of the night. So thanks.
Well, here's the thing, not to reopen a wound, but it was reminiscent again of the LA game, which I remember in the LA game you didn't play as well as you'd wanted to. And afterwards you said, I was seeing 3 rims. It's like, so you're out there trying to battle, you're doing everything you can, but sometimes, there's a greater force that has other things in mind.
Exactly. The other night was the same sort of thing. I was looking at 3 rims and I was repeatedly choosing the wrong one is what continued to happen. But as I mentioned, I went in the back, I got an IV. So I started to get back to feeling my normal self. Still not 100%, but definitely good enough to play some basketball. So, at this point in the season, whatever it takes, we're all hands on deck right now, obviously right in the thick of it in terms of a playoff push here. So doing what we can.
Yeah, it is insane. We have a great conversation with Joe, by the way, but towards the end, we reference just how insane this year has been, how quickly the season has flown by. We're down to 3 weeks left, I think, before the playoffs start. It's just insane. Yeah,
it's really interesting because this year feels so unique in so many different ways with the protocols and the procedures and everything. And truthfully, for us, the Miami Heat, it's like this one. It's kind of almost blended in with our bubble experience, where it just feels like this one long stretch. Particularly just because we only had, I think it was 60 days or so off, but a lot of that is spent getting your body back right, and then also trying to gear and wind back up for training camp. And then once the season has started, it's just been a blur. We played every other night pretty much, with of course some back-to-backs mixed in there. So of course no excuses. Everyone's going through it in some capacity, and the real separator has been the teams that are able to overcome and combat these types of situations situations and circumstances and continue to put forth winning efforts, which we've shown we're capable of doing in stretches. The consistency has definitely been something that we've lacked this year. But once again, it's really all about just playing your best basketball at the right time, and that's what we're all locked in on right now.
I think it's inevitable that with you being a member of the Miami Heat, this sort of turns into a Miami Heat podcast. But I just am realizing that we're both wearing Miami Heat shirts, which isn't helping the narrative at all.
Well, I mean, I think you just kind of got to lean into it. I mean, at this point, like you said, of course, I know where my loyalty lies. I'd like to think that your lies someplace similar. Of course. Given our friendship. I know you have friends around the league. You're a very connected individual, but I think I'd like to think that ours runs a little deeper.
It does. And further, I don't think it's a bad thing that we're a Miami Heat podcast. It's just, we're leaning into it with our attire, I guess is my point.
I mean, we've also like half of our guests have been Miami Heat players. Right. So like, what are we really doing here? Are we trying to act like we're not? I mean, clearly there's some preference here.
Got to embrace it. I wanted to ask you about the way the NBA is handling kind of relaxing COVID restrictions. I know that a lot of guys are vaccinated. And you had mentioned, so I wanted to ask you to in a little bit more depth. You'd mentioned that some restrictions were going to be relaxed a little bit. How are they moving forward with all that?
Sure. So I'll start this out with a PSA. I am fully vaccinated. I've received both shots of the Pfizer vaccine. I have been fully vaccinated now for 2 or 3 weeks. We're also, as an organization, I think, on the cusp of a kind of vaccination public push. We're going to start putting out some different content. So I figured I'd break the news here. I think it'll be broken by the organization, but I'm not going to break anyone else's. That's, I believe, a HIPAA violation for you lawyers and doctors at home. But I am fully vaccinated. I can share that information. And truthfully, it really actually hasn't changed all that much. There's actually been, according to the league, I guess, like a recent little spike. So the protocols we're still taking as seriously as ever. I think one of the interesting things about the majority of our team, once again, I'm not going to say anybody is vaccinated, but potentially maybe being vaccinated, is that the contact tracing looks a lot different. So if somebody were to have a false positive or actually have a positive, if you are vaccinated, so I'll speak for myself, even if I was around that person, because I am now vaccinated, I would not have to miss time, even though my tests are showing up negative. Because that was part of the issue. We had an instance earlier this year before the vaccine was readily available to us, in that we had a player test positive, and a lot of guys were just knocked out due to health and safety protocols just because they had been in their proximity. So that's actually, it's really good for the league as a whole moving forward, because you aren't going to see guys get held out because of contact tracing, which can be, of course, there's some science behind it, but it can feel, I'll say this, it can feel somewhat arbitrary at times. And I think it's just frustrating in that, we're wearing masks all the time. We're doing everything we can to be socially distant still, despite everything going on. But to have somebody outside of your control, or maybe somebody you're matched up against, have a positive test, it would be frustrating to then have to sit out, even though you might be fully healthy. So it's interesting. I mean, it's obviously an incredibly difficult situation. I think the league is doing the best that they can. But the vaccination, just more people getting vaccinated, definitely adds a different dynamic.
Yeah, and it's got massive playoff implications too, right?
Sure.
Like if there's a COVID scare, knock on wood, then guys aren't vaccinated, then you have this whole issue of having to sit out in a series, and that would just be terrible. So that's good to hear. Staying on the health train and getting vaccinated, I think maybe we're on the horizon of starting to do these in person, which is pretty exciting.
I think that might be summer 2021 activities. Wow. There's definitely a hope. Davis and I have been talking about it loosely, I'll say. I haven't put anything in writing or in any sort of verbal commitment, but we want to try to ultimately get these to the point. As much as we love the Zoom, I think there's a different dynamic that comes with being able to be in the presence of not only one another but our guest, of course, as well. I think it just I don't want to say eliminates, but like limits, I'll say, some of the banter and just some of the potential there in our conversation. So I think that the Zoom has allowed a lot of this to be possible, in the midst of a global pandemic, to launch and start a podcast. And we're appreciative of all the support. But we do, I'm a strong believer that there's another level that we can tap into here.
Oh yeah. Brick by brick, baby. We haven't pulled that, line out in a while, but brick by brick, we're building this thing. Sometimes I'm laying in bed at night, just eyes closed, thinking about sitting, watching a Miami sunset. Maybe there's a cocktail in hand, sitting on a sofa. You're there, and then there's a guest, and we're just kicking it. We're having a great conversation. I think, like you said, it just adds a whole new dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, that's an ideal situation. It was funny. Davis and I were actually speaking off the air earlier because we do have a friendship outside of our podcast. And potentially on the horizon, I will be moving into hopefully a different place, maybe with a little bit more space. And I was thinking about how I wanted to have maybe a roommate. And of course, Davis and I work together, coworkers. I figured he'd be a great addition to ultimately be my roommate. But then I quickly realized that Dave is engaged to be married here pretty soon, which drastically changes the landscape. I don't think you're going to be, packing up your bags and moving down to Miami anytime soon when you're going to have a wife here.
It changes the dynamic a little bit. I think that window might be closing or closed. Actually, really, it's going to be closed. I'm getting married August 1st, which is right around the time that you might be potentially looking at upgrading your living space, like you alluded to.
Maybe.
So yeah, I don't see a world where me and my now wife are looking for a roommate. I think we'll probably be looking for a place on our own.
That would be a dynamic living environment if all three of us hunkered down together. Anyways, let's move forward here. Let's push into the Reddit question. What do we got, Dave?
So this week we have a question from Schultz10191, and they asked the Reddit community, but we're hijacking the question. They asked, in the last 10 years, what is the greatest individual performance you've watched live? So you have watched many more performances live than the average person. So I'm very curious to hear if there are a couple moments or one in particular that jumps to your mind.
It's a great question. So I'm going to kind of cheat the question a little bit. My performance is going to be Jimmy Butler in the finals.
Yep.
You could pick a specific game, but I think picking one game would be doing his overall performance, sustained performance throughout the finals, a injustice. I think that just watching him come out every single night and ultimately just give us a chance to win. We were depleted from an injury standpoint in some respects. A lot of people had counted us out, and his just will and determination and what he was putting up numbers-wise, the triple-doubles, the scoring output, the distributing, the rebounding, he was just doing it across so many fronts. That was an incredible performance and truly an inspiring one. So that's mine. I don't know what you got.
Game 3, was it?
Yeah.
Where he had triple-double with 40.
40, yeah.
40, 12, and 12 or something like that.
Incredible.
So, yeah.
And that was, and you got to think, that's our entire season on the line. If we go down 3-0, then it's for sure over. But he wills us to victory in that one to get us to 2-1. That was incredibly impressive.
Which one was he hunched over the table?
That would be game 5.
Okay. So those are the two that jump to mind.
I think he had a 30-point triple-double in that one as well.
Again,
what do you got?
You've seen way more live action than I have. But the game that came to mind for me was back in 2018. I was at a Lakers-Warriors game in LA, and Clay had 44 in 3 quarters. He had 44 in like 25 minutes or something like that. I think he was 10 of 11 from 3. And it was just one of those games, he has a couple of these in his career, but it was one of those where he was throwing it in the Atlantic Ocean, like you've referenced on this podcast. And it was just incredible to see.
Yeah, I mean, seeing somebody get to that place is special. I haven't had it to that extent, but I somewhat can relate to the feeling of going to that place, and that's really special. But even just being able to witness it and watch it is really fun as well.
Well, I have a runner-up. I have a runner-up performance, not in the NBA, because I think it's important to highlight some magical live performances outside.
Sure.
And the next one that came to mind was the NEPSAC Championship back in 2013. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you were 9 for 9 from the field, maybe 11 for 11. You didn't miss a shot. I know that.
9 for 9 sounds right.
21 points, 9 for 9 from the field.
I think it was 24.
24 points, 9 for 9 from the field, didn't miss a shot in the NEPSAC championship game. That's at Phillips Exeter, people. Prep school, high school basketball. Incredibly competitive game. We were favored, but we needed a performance from our best player to carry us to a championship. And you didn't miss a shot in the entire game to carry us to a championship, so I think that has to be in the conversation.
I think that was really just my teammates putting me in situations to be successful.
No media answer here.
No, nobody other than yourself, truly. That was a fun one to look back on. Just more so because you're winning it with your best friends, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, but not missing a shot also must be kind of cool.
Yeah, it's nice. I'm not gonna lie.
I remember you getting interviewed in the hallway to the locker room after the game, which didn't really happen in prep school basketball. Like, because it was the championship, there were a couple media outlet people there, and you got interviewed. And it was the coolest moment ever, just for all of us. Like, we just won a championship. Duncan's getting interviewed. It felt like we were big time.
Yeah, that was. I mean, that whole run with that group was special in and of itself. And for you to go on a limb and say that I was our best player, I think is probably giving me a little bit too much credit in and of itself. But what I remember most is just, winning a championship with your boys. It's as good as it gets.
You probably weren't our best player. Shout out to Chris Braley, Harry Rafferty, Jordan Hill. You might have been fourth on that list, actually.
4 or 5, yeah, somewhere in the mix there.
Yeah.
Not on that night though. On that night I was pretty special.
Hey, you stepped up when it mattered, man. Lights were on.
Yeah. All right, well, moving on, we have this week's long shot feature. We have Chloe Zhao, who recently won the Oscar for Best Director this past weekend at the Academy Awards, and she directed Nomadland, which also won Best Picture, I might add. So she had the 2-for-2 sweep there. But she became the second woman ever to win Best Director and the first Asian American woman and the first woman of color to take home these awards. So shout out to Chloe Zhao. That's a big time performance.
Love it. Yep. Awesome. It's a good one. Another good one. These are good every week though.
So that pretty much wraps up the front of show here. We covered a lot of bases, from vaccinations to NEPSAC moments and memories.
Oh yeah.
And of course Chloe Zhao. We wrap it up with her shout out. But we have a great conversation with Joe Ingles. He has an incredibly refreshing perspective on life, basketball, and everything in between. So I really think you guys are going to enjoy this one.